So we are in week 2 of our series on the Psalms of Ascent, our ascent up Mount Zion. Zion is the mountain of God. We're looking at the Psalms of Ascent, which is, as we learned last week, Israel's road trip music. The music they would listen to as they climbed towards Jerusalem to worship at different festivals, such as the Passover and different events. Now, instead of listening to music driving in the car, Spotify on the speakers, they were using the Psalms of Ascent as their playlist, which they sang along together in their journey. Last week, we looked at the first song in the Psalms of Ascent in this playlist, Psalm 120. The psalm started off feeling far away from God because of conflicts. It led us marching towards God and beginning our journey nearer and closer to His work. And so this week, we find ourselves one psalm ahead in Psalm 121. And before we can read and I can preach about this psalm, I must first give you a hiking lesson. See, as a backpacking guide, I have taken thousands of people hiking into the woods. And early on, I started noticing something. We would sit around the campfire at the end of the night, and we would ask people what they saw that day. And what started happening over and over again was people saying, "I didn't see anything but my 2 feet." Can you relate to this feeling? They were hiking, all I saw all day long were my 2 feet. In other words, they were so focused on surviving the journey and they were struggling so much that they never took time to look around them. And so I started noticing this problem, and so I started early in the week on our backpacking trips giving hiking lessons. And so I want to spend a few minutes with you this morning giving you a lesson on how to hike. Because when you're hiking, you have to know where you're going, right? You have to know in the long term, miles ahead where you're trying to go. But you also have to know in the short term, like how am I going to get around this rock or this route, or where's the trail taking me? Which turn in the trail do I need to take? And you also need to know where you came from. And this is why it's important to have hiking lessons. So first off, maybe you've noticed when you climb to the top of a mountain, the place you started is very far away. It's hard to notice where you're at. Now on 14ers, it's easier because you just follow the trail, right? And the other 500 people where they're going, it's kind of obvious. But when you get off the 14ers, it gets extremely more difficult. And someone from this church, her name was Paige Robinson, taught me this technique. We were on Antora, the mountains just here at the top of Poncha Pass, and we're looking down this remote valley that we had been camped in. We're on the summit of the mountain. She said to us rookie guides, "Where's camp?" And so we're picking all these various places where camp was, and it wasn't where camp was. Because your camp, when you're on top of the mountain, is just a little fold in the mountainside. And if you don't know where camp is, it's going to set you back hours, right? If not spending a night in the woods, if you can't find the exact drainage where you're coming from. So when you're hiking, you have to look back. Things look different when you look back. Where did I come from? We have to keep our head up when we're hiking for other reasons too. We have to keep an eye on the weather. We know that here in Colorado with the lightning storms, right? We have to keep an eye out for wildlife. What if there's a moose in the trail? And we also have to keep our eye out for when inevitably that mountain biker comes by at 100 miles an hour, right? You got to yell, "Jump! Get off the trail!" Right, Dean? Where are you at? Oh, yeah. Dean's our mountain biker here at the church. So, beyond just the practical reasons of keeping our head up when we hike, we have to be able to see the views, right? That's why we're out there. We want to see the trees, the wildflowers, the landscapes, the mountains, any wildlife. And if you're just looking down at your feet, you're never going to notice or see any of those things. So here's the trick. Here's the trick. This works on the trail. This works off of the trail. When you're hiking, you need to look about 10 yards ahead of you and see what obstacles you have. Think about those obstacles. and trust your peripheral vision to notice those obstacles. Go about 10 yards, look at the next 10 yards. Okay, what am I kind of facing here? Look up. Let your vision focus in on what's in front of you, and you will be shocked over time how this comes second nature. I'm telling you, yesterday I was charting a course straight through some of the thickest woods, and I wasn't tripping at all. And I was just trusting that my vision as I looked up was going to take care of me as I got over these logs, sticks, holes, rocks, all these different things. Now, you might want to try this at first with hiking poles, all right? Give you a little extra balance. But as you practice this, you can learn how to hike with your head up. It's an important skill to have. And I share this with you today because today I'm going to try to teach you how to do this spiritually. Because really, isn't it easy in life, more so than hiking, when the hard things hit, when life throws you its challenges, to get down on yourself? I mean, think about it the next time the hard times hit, that your posture can just change. You can find yourself looking at the ground, putting your head down, shrugging your shoulders as you are dealing with the difficult times in life. But if we look up, when we look up, we see all the things around us. Most importantly, we see what God's trying to show us. So pray with me as we continue our sin up Mount Zion. God, we are seeking to move closer and closer to you in this journey through the Psalms of Ascents. So may your Spirit guide us on this journey, higher and higher up the mountain. May we come to see that through our trials in life, you are with us, walking alongside of us, guiding us, taking care of us, preparing the way for us. So to that end, pour through me the gift of preaching, that we may ascend closer and closer to you every day. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I want to thank Ryan and Cooper for reading for us today our psalm, Psalm 121. It's a short psalm. I want us to memorize it. The first two verses are some of the most recognizable verses in all of the psalm, and I'd like for us to read it again. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither sleep nor slumber. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and your going, both now and forevermore. So to start off breaking this down, let me show you this image. What do you see in this image? Who sees the old lady? Does anyone see the old lady? You see her nose there and her chin in the white in the bottom, her dark lips. Okay, who here sees the young lady in contrast? Her chin looking away, her hair in the top. Okay, this psalm, the start of this psalm, the first two verses are to feel like this picture. Like, what do we see here as you're explaining to each other right now? Okay, here's how you see this picture, right? This picture is a paradox, and so are the first few verses. Because what do you see when you lift your eyes to the hills? I mean, what is it that you see? There's many things to see when you lift your eyes and you start looking at those mountains. Do you see the hard work? Like, to get up those mountains, to get over those mountains, it's going to be a lot of hard work. It's going to be a lot of energy, right? Do you start seeing your path of how you're going to get over those mountains? Do you start seeing the ways you might be able to ski on those mountains or mountain bike on those mountains or find some wildlife on those mountains, right? Do you start seeing those things? Do you see the dangers in those mountains, the mountain lions or the bears that might be lurking? For them, in their day, in ancient Israel, they might have been worried about the robbers waiting to grab them, capture them, rob them as they go into those mountains. Or do you see the views going into those mountains? Do you see the beauty of God's creation? Do you see the wonders in store for you? Are you excited about what you might experience there? This is the paradox of verse chapter 1. We often see beauty and difficulty both wrapped together in life. And the first verse ends with a pondering of where does our help come from? And the answer is in verse 2. Our help comes from God. But there's an authority given to God, the maker of heaven and earth. That this God has a certain power and is able to do certain things that ordinary, regular people cannot do. And the rest of the chapter from here on out is a reminder of this power that God is looking out for us in our mountains in life. So you might have noticed that after verse 2, the language shifts. In verse 1 and 2, it's first person. Me, I, where does my help come from? And it shifts to second person for the rest of the Psalms. Now remember, in the Psalms of the Ascent, they are meant to take us somewhere. We are marching somewhere. They are moving us somewhere. So verse 1 and 2 is the vista. It's the looking off in the distance, right? It's seeing the beautiful view and enjoying it. In the Message translation, it would sound like this. It would sound like Rocky Mountain High, Colorado. I've seen it rain and fire in the sky. If you look that up in the Message translation, that's what it says. It's the beauty. But the third verse is when things get hard. When you're hiking, when you're putting the work in, when you're reminding yourself on the journey, okay, the help comes from God, but how is the help coming? One of the things we often talk about in our world today is self-talk. What do we tell ourselves about ourselves? It was interesting when I was running cross country, we talked a lot before it was kind of popular about self-talk, and we noticed the girls were much kinder on themselves than the guys were. The girls were like, you're doing this, you're great, you're strong, you're tough. Us guys, we were beating each other up. You're terrible, man. You're not a man. Suck it up. Be tough. Work harder. And we constantly, if we think about it, we have this inner dialogue, this inner self-talk. Of how am I doing? What, I'm not doing okay. I am doing okay. I can be tough here. I'm not tough here. I'm brave. I'm not brave. I'm lacking courage. What do I do? We're going through this all the time in life. It can be exhausting. We can be our worst critic. And so the rest of the psalm is teaching us what to say not only about ourselves when we're hiking, when we're in the difficulties and the struggles of life, but actually what to say about God. So the very first thing is about footing. Contrary to what Harry told Lloyd, the Rocky Mountains are rocky, right? And we know what it's like to have to watch our steps. It's a Dumb and Dumber reference for the young people out there. There's all types of different rocks that we find ourselves in Colorado. There's slippery ones, there's big ones, there's medium-sized ones. But the worst of all the rock, I think, in Colorado is called scree. And it's basically like pea gravel that is like dumped on the mountains. And when you step in this stuff, you're just sliding and it's getting in your boots and you can hardly keep your footing. And you're like, what is going on here? But God talks about something that when we wander into the scree fields of life, to take comfort. That God's watching over us. God is providing for us footing. Footing for us to continue on in our journey, to keep watching. And while that sounds significant to us, actually verses 3 and 4, the metaphor there is even more significant. It's the image of God not sleeping. The psalmist depicts an image of God who is constantly watching over us. But here's what's even cooler about this metaphor. This is some biblical trash talk, okay? I want this psalmist to go to some Bronco games with me and talk trash, because the gods of the other countries around Israel were known for having to rest, that they needed sleep, that they couldn't be watching all the time, looking out and taking care of them all the time. The classic example of this is Elijah's face-off with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. If you remember that, they've got this sacrifice sitting there, and they're saying, okay, whose God can burn this sacrifice? And some of the trash talk of Elijah is, well, maybe your God's asleep. Maybe you need to wake your God up, because they're sleeping on the job. And the psalmist here is distinguishing God from mortal needs and mortal constraints. God doesn't need to rest in the same way we rest. God is continually looking after us, our protection on our pilgrim journeys in life, even when we might feel tired, even when we might lose concentration, even when we might slip or need rest ourselves. God is watching after us. And this all continues in verses 5 and 6, if you're following along with me. We know all too well here the power of the sun in Colorado, right? It's been trendy to talk about the strong UV rays this summer. I've seen it everywhere that we receive in the Colorado sun. We have sunglasses, we have sunproof clothing, we have sunblock. We plant things like trees or those little shade things that the Poncha wind always blows away to block us from the sun. But that's what God's doing for us. In our trials in life, can you see the shade that God is providing for us? I mean, think about it with our kids. Sometimes our kids are hot, especially babies, and we do all sorts of things. We have all kinds of devices to give them shade. If not, sometimes we will be the shade for our children. That is the image God is giving us here. God is protecting us from the harshest UV rays on our journey. See, Peter Pan might want to lose his shadow, but we want to keep our shadow as Christians. And here's what's really interesting. The same metaphor is used for the moon. Maybe you've walked around at night during a full moon. It's crazy when your eyes adjust how well you can see during a full moon and see what's going on. And so for thousands of years, people believed there was such thing as being moonstruck. It was to suffer negative symptoms due to the influence of lunar rays. It's actually where we get our term lunatic from. It's from lunar rays. And the psalmist is saying that even at night, even the power of the moon, that God is protecting us in those times as well. And the psalm comes to an end in verses 7 and 8. The journey shifts from this one singular journey to all of our journeys in life. In verse 7, we see that God is protecting us from the work of the devil and is the one who actually has power over life and death. Then in verse 8, we see this phrase, the goings and the comings and the goings. Then that is this thought that God is looking out for us all the time in our life. It is this belief that God is the one watching over the psalmist beyond just one hike. The psalmist feels enveloped by God's protection on all sides in every situation in life. What a cool feeling it is to have that. So take a second to reflect with me. How do we hike spiritually? When we look at the mountains that we're set out to climb, how do we summit those mountains? How do we go over those passes in life? And first, we have to look up. We have to learn how to hike in our life looking up. There are dangers in our journey. There is hard work ahead of us. We need to plan and understand what is coming, but more importantly, we need to look up to see God's protection. We need to see that the maker of heaven and earth is looking out for us. And so it is with this confidence that we remind ourselves in our journey that our self-talks sound something like, God's given me my footing today. I don't know where my footing's going to come from, but today God's going to give me my footing. I don't know who's looking out for me in this situation, but I know God is looking out for me in all sorts of situations. God, this is really tough right now. I feel the heat of this situation. God, give me some shade. Allow me to see how you are giving me shade in this season in life. These are our self-talks as we learn how to hike with our head up. They remind us how to continue on. They show us how God is working in our life. And it doesn't mean that the mountains go away, that the challenges are avoided, that life is easy, like you're walking through Plainview, Texas. It means that we see God's grace and mercy and footing and shade in the mountains in life. We see how God is watching over this. And over time, like a hiker learning how to look up, going down the trail, we learn to look up and see God at work. And so this sounds abstract. Let me be a little more specific. You know, the hardest part about being a preacher is that God has this sneaky way of teaching you the lesson you have to preach that Sunday. Oh, and I wish it didn't have to work this way. And this week's been harder than usual. The doctor broke the news to us about Aspen slowly. She came in and she started going through the charts and she started explaining what was going on. And then she goes, you know, I know I had sent some positive messages about where we were going. This might just be another annual checkup. But it's not. She explained to us everything that we were going to need to do with Aspen, and then she kind of paused. A lot of you in the medical field out there have told me stories about how Christians would respond when they were greeted with devastating news. Our late elder Jerry had just some incredible stories he would share with us. And how it would be very different as opposed to just your average Joe walking in, receiving these really difficult situations. And you know what I always wondered? Like when my time comes, because we all know that hard time's coming, right? How am I going to handle that conversation? And here I was on Friday. Okay, what do I do? And the doctor's looking to see what Aubrey and I can handle, right? Oh man, and I felt myself for a second. The head going down, the shoulders. What do I do? Where do I go from here? And I was like, oh man, God, here we go. You're teaching me this lesson this week, okay? I got to keep the head up. I got to look ahead. I got to understand that there is shade here, that God is watching over us, that God's giving us our footing through this trial, through this mountain that we are called to go through. And it was funny because I think the doctor at times was like a little thrown off. She'd be like, okay, well, I can leave now, and we can talk more in a couple weeks when I get back on vacation. And Aubrey and I are like, we're sitting with you now. Can we talk? You know? Okay, well, we need to have this surgery probably in around the next 3 months. I can wait to put the orders in. Let's put the orders in now, right? Well, if you want to, the nurse that goes over all the different pacemaker and what this looks like and does the training, she happens to be here today. If you're willing to meet with her, let's meet with her, right? And so they left, and the nurse comes in, and we're going through all this same information, and the nurse is kind of feeling us out. And I don't know. Like, I think they're used to some pretty worried parents, I imagine. Some parents having some strong emotions and feelings. And I don't know how we did in comparison. Maybe I should ask them to leave a Google review for us. But it seemed like they were like, okay, they can have the conversations. They can talk about it, right? It's keeping your head up. We know there's obstacles. We know there's trials, but how do we keep our head up? And we are still early on in this journey. I don't know yet where the shade is coming from. I don't know how we're keeping our footing, but I have to trust in faith that God is doing those things. And I trust how it often goes that in hindsight, it'll be revealed to us how God was taking care of us along the way. So thank you for giving me this recent example from this week. I hope it was beneficial to show you how God's been working in our life. But I have more proof about how God works in the life of a Christian. See, now that we have video cameras and we videotape everything, we have video evidence of Psalms 121 in action. How God actually looks over us at times. It looks like this.
Roger, are you okay?
Yeah.
Нет, вот так, знаете?
My kids and I had fun picking this out. If you were to look around, you would see there's like hundreds of near-miss videos. There's a YouTube channel just dedicated to this near-miss videos. My kid's favorite was the wife yelling, "Roger, are you okay?" That was they said they were going to sit through the sermon just to hear that part, but that they forgot. But I bet, and maybe we could talk about this after service. This is a fun thing to talk about at lunch today. I bet we could list so many stories of near-miss videos, of when we should have died, when something happened, and somehow we were saved. I mean, I could give you so many examples. Just this week, I was shuttling the kids to and from wrestling practice, and we came through the intersection by Walmart and Sonic, and in just the 5 minutes that I was gone, there was an accident right there. Could that have been God watching out for me? Could that have been God taking care of me? So God is the protector, the sustainer, the one looking after us. So church, let's keep our heads up as we hike in faith, as we trust God, as we continue on our journey. Thank God with me as we thank God for this protection. God, we lift up our head this morning and we look for you. We look for you as our help and our provider in these mountains in life. So through your Spirit, help us to learn how to find our footing in life, to see how you give us shade on our journey. God, continue to watch over us. So thank you for our guide, our forerunner in the faith, our pioneer, Jesus. May we continue to follow him. It's in his name that I pray. Amen.